What I've learned today has left me feeling both like an archaeologist and a geneticist. I'm sorting through the ruins of something that was once notable, yet at the same time, I'm also cataloging some very strange mutations. Hey there, folks! No real clean segue into this. This is a topic I kind of stumbled upon by accident, thanks to a commenter. Shout out to Devada123, who commented on the video I did about The Escapist basically completely falling apart, at least as far as its YouTube channel went 2 years ago? Yeah, we're almost at 2 years now. And bringing to my attention the current state of that YouTube channel. And I don't have a greater point to make necessarily. It was just fascinating for me to catalog the state of this thing. And just as someone who used to really enjoy that channel, wow. So if you're not familiar with The Escapist, I'm going to have to go with was. This has got to be past tense at this point. It was, at least as far as its YouTube presence goes, primarily about video games. It was best known for Zero Punctuation, the flagship project of Yahtzee Croshaw. Now, The Escapist has changed hands a few times over the years, but in 2022, it was acquired by something called Gamer Group. I have to say it that way because it's spelled this way, so here we are. And they started to put a lot more pressure on the performance and financial viability of the YouTube channel. Now understand, so far as I can tell, the YouTube channel was always profitable. It just wasn't necessarily growing, or at least not the way that they wanted. It actually had been growing the last few years. Nick Calandra had taken over as the editor-in-chief for the video side of things and had brought in a whole new team of people who were doing pretty well. I mean, Zero Punctuation was still by far the flagship project on that channel, and it outperformed everything else by a pretty heavy margin, but other stuff was getting a following, getting decent views, even if it wasn't the same. But the pressure from the Gamer Group basically amounted to, why isn't everything as successful as our most successful thing? And in late 2023, they fired Nick Calandra. They badly miscalculated, because I have no doubt what they wanted to have happen was they got rid of him, brought in an editor-in-chief who wouldn't push back on them and would just do what they told him to do, and everyone else would just stay there. Maybe they'd trim some of the fat later on, but we'll just keep these people. Yeah, that backfired real harshly because the entire video creation team left with Nick, and they went on to form Second Wind Group. Zero Punctuation is now fully Ramblematic, and they have multiple series over there, some of which are continuations of things that started on The Escapist, some of which are more or less new projects, and all of it is pretty decent. I watch Second Wind Group, and I enjoy their output. So that left The Escapist, as far as its YouTube channel goes, in a little bit of a weird place. Because, as I said, everybody left. Not just the talent, the editors, the people with the actual logins to be able to manage the YouTube site. I'm pretty sure they didn't even have access to the account. They didn't know how to get into it because everyone with the credentials left. I talked more about this whole aspect of it in great detail on this video previously. So go ahead and check it out if you want more of the details on that and my thoughts on it at the time. Now, the Escapist channel has come back, sort of. The first thing that they put up was their compilation of every Zero Punctuation that they had, at least, from 2023. That is not too shocking. Those long-form compilation things, if they perform pretty well, they tend to get a really long watch time on top of everything else. That's a pretty good revenue generator. I'm not going to lie. I've thought about doing some compilation stuff now and then on this channel. The main reason that has stopped me is because I don't know what I would be compiling. Like, would I do it by like Doctor Who reviews? Would I do it? I don't know. I couldn't come up with a clean answer, but it's something that I keep thinking about intermittently because, I don't know, it'd be nice to have an easy week, maybe get ahead of stuff, but regardless, that came out, and then it was pretty quiet for a while. But then in March of 2024, there started to be new uploads, actual edited, like properly constructed stuff. New people who hadn't been on there before, but it kicked off with a video that was called I Was Wrong About Digital Gaming, written and directed by one Brett Medlock. Now, if you look at the credits at the end, he is credited with both the writing and the hosting, and there is one credited editor. So what it looks like happened was, after just having the channel sit there and getting whatever residuals come from people who rewatch Zero Punctuation a whole bunch, because it's quite a few. I'm one of them. It's comfort background noise. I don't know what to tell you. But in any case, it was very clear that whatever that trickle was, that wasn't really cutting it. So Gamer Group wanted to start to revive the channel. And honestly, while it was likely due to a not having access to the account at first and not having any staff to do anything with was probably the main cause of the delay, that was probably to their benefit anyway, because if they had had a whole new team come up immediately, then the question would have been, you couldn't have worked with the people who are already here. You were willing to hire everybody right away. And it would have just had that feel of like, you just got divorced a week ago and now you're bringing your new girlfriend around. What are you doing? So the gap in time was probably to their benefit. It is interesting to note there's the only 2 credited people. That is probably the bare minimum that they could get by with, because honestly, neither editing nor writing and hosting, aka filming, are the longest time sinks in the world, but they are about comparable. Or at least it's comparable when you're presenting it this way, where it is mostly the person just talking at the camera with the occasional visual insert, i.e. more or less what I do. It takes about as long to edit as it does to write, plan, and film a thing. So if you have one person doing all of it, that is a lot. Trust me, I know. Now, the first 2 videos from this 2-person team came out within 5 days of each other, which might seem to indicate that the initial hope was that the 2 of them could crank out stuff more rapidly than, a video a week, which is, I think, the reasonable amount of time you could expect anything of decent quality from a team that size. Well, that didn't hold up. It fell apart pretty quickly, and then we would see the occasional other name show up, like Matthew Razek, who wrote and narrated Godzilla -1 versus the New Empire and How We All Win. The other trick that's in play in order to get them to crank out stuff at what might otherwise be an unreasonable pace for such a small team is to actually adapt existing reviews, either from the Escapist website itself, hold on to that, we'll come back to it, but also from other sites that Gamers Group owns, such as Destructoid. This results in the occasional credit listing a different writer and Brett Medlock being listed as the adapter of the original review. But for the most part, it does appear to have been Brett Medlock sort of leading the charge and being the primary face of the channel at this point. There are a couple of other weird outliers. There's one video in particular that I was like, wait a minute. Shadow of the Erd Tree Top 10 Most Annoying Enemies is fully credited to Ericoods for the Win, which is a completely separate channel. It's got 20-something thousand subscribers that time of talking. That is a video that is only on The Escapist and is not on her own channel. So to me, that says they tried outsourcing somebody freelance to drop a video and see how that worked. Performance-wise, I didn't seem to make a big difference. From their cost-wise, who knows? It does look like Erica, who runs that channel, has been picking up more freelance or commission work as she lists several reviews up on IGN on her channel. But that was one of the things that happened toward the tail end of the regular uploads of what I'm going to call normal stuff, or at least an attempt to have normal stuff. August of 2024 was the final video featuring Brett Medlock. After that, channel went quiet for quite a while, almost a year. Now, this is where we have to move off of the YouTube channel. Don't worry, we're going to come back to it. Holy crap. We're going to move off the YouTube channel for a minute and talk about what's been going on with Gamer Group, because they are not in great shape. Gamers Group had layoffs in both July and September of 2024. Now, as I said, the last normal video from Brett Medlock, actually the last normal video from anybody, just happened to be from him, came out in August of the year, which is sandwiched right between the 2 rounds of layoffs. Naturally, my initial suspicion was that Metlock was let go during one of those 2 rounds of layoffs. I'm not sure that's actually what happened, though, because according to his Twitter, he is the social lead for Destructoid, which Gamers Group does own. Now, he's also handling the socials of a few other things as well, so it looks like he's not doing that exclusively for Gamers Group. But given that he's still linked to Destructoid, he probably wasn't flat out laid off, although he might have given reduced hours or a different job title or something. They definitely had him stop doing anything video related. That much is certain. And then, just a few weeks ago, they started uploading again. And it's just gambling videos. Like, there's a little bit actual poker in there, but it's mostly people playing digital slot machines. And these are not on-site talent for the Escapists. These are, well, I'll talk about where at least some of these things came from. There were a couple of other things that happened at the same time. One is the YouTube channel got a logo redesign, which is interesting because in all of its years, the Escapist has never changed its logo. It's changed the opening title card and the way that logo gets displayed at a few points. But as far as the actual logo itself, it's never changed and technically still hasn't. While The Escapist was probably best known for its YouTube channel, again, mostly thanks to Zero Punctuation, that's not the only thing it is. That's not the only thing it's ever been. It was a digital magazine, and it has still a website doing video game news, reviews, etc. And that is still running. And so far as I can tell, it's still running as normal. I can't really compare that the way that I could with what had happened to the YouTube channel because I never really engaged in the site. I don't really go to sites like that at all, so I can't really compare it to anything. But browsing around it, especially having seen the gambling nonsense that was going on the YouTube channel, what I expected to find was a whole bunch of SEO-laden slop articles that looked like they were paid just to juice the algorithm and bring up as much, people talking about this thing as possible, and probably a lot of gambling-related stuff. And I didn't really find that. There's probably some on there, but it seemed to be lacking the kind of, well, frankly, nonsense that the YouTube channel would have led me to believe. Now, just briefly sort of looking at the credited writers, those who are not listed as some kind of editor are listed either as contributors or are mentioned as being freelance. So it looks like who is actually still fully employed there is a handful of people at the editor level who also write articles, and then they are just taking freelance or commission work as it is able to come in. And looking at some of the lists of articles people have done, some people have done a lot, some people have done just a handful. Granted, I can't know what the back end looks like, but from the outside looking in, it reminds me of the way Yahoo used to handle a lot of their article writing with their contributor program they had. Oh, cripes, how long ago was this? Like 12 years ago or so? I was part of that. It's all gone now. You can't find any of this stuff anymore. I used to write about Jersey Shore. Wow. That was an odd time in my life. Anyways, that's kind of what it looks like, that people are being paid on a per finished piece of work basis, which will generally lead to one of two things. People who crank out a lot of stuff in short succession so that they can get paid as often as possible, or people who try to do that and quickly burn out and go away and don't come back. But all of those people would still be classified as contract and or freelance. So to my eye, at least, the Escapist website appears to be functioning basically as usual. I actually wonder if this might be part of why the logo, specifically only on the YouTube channel, changed. Because I have to imagine that maybe somewhere within the apparatus of the Gamers Group is somebody who realizes that what they're currently doing with the YouTube channel would be brand damaging. And so while still leaving the name intact at time of recording, they have changed the logo to not have it be immediately associated with either what the channel used to be or what the website still is. Which just begs the question, what are they doing? Okay, so here's where I have to jump in from the edit, because at the time that I shot this, I had some very unfounded notions about maybe what was going on, and then I kind of stumbled down a rabbit hole by accident. You see, I was gathering assets to use for the visuals for the editing, which is generally something that I do after I film the video, and just kind of on a hunch, I ended up reverse image searching that new logo that was on YouTube. And I found out it wasn't a new logo, it was an existing one, and it's for a cryptocurrency. It's for something called Coin Casino, which is, yeah, you guessed it, it's a crypto company making a coin that is intended to be used on casino sites, probably as a way to skirt about regulation on how casinos are actually managed, but I can't prove that. But this kind of sent me down a bit of a spiral. At first, I actually wondered if somebody had hacked the YouTube account and started putting this stuff up there, because as I said, I didn't see a whole bunch of stuff on the Escapist website that appeared to be normal. Well, turns out I just didn't look far enough on the Escapist website. If I'd scrolled down a little bit further than I had initially, I would have found this. And this is pretty blatant. I'm kind of annoyed at myself for missing it initially. The mistake that I made was looking in their standard articles for signs of SEO slop, with things like superfluous mentions of gambling sites or links that don't need to be there to make the article function. I went in assuming that kind of SEO nonsense would be hidden by means of integrating it into articles, but they did try and hide it, but it's just by giving it its own isolated section and hoping people don't stumble across that, because it's not actually meant to be read. Quick thing if you don't know too much about tech, SEO is search engine optimization. Basically, that just has to do with tricking search engines like Google into prioritizing your stuff by inserting references to it in as many places as possible. You go far enough back in time, there were basically completely fake sites that would just generate slop and garbage just to mention a certain product a certain number of times so that it would increase its preference in Google searches. I actually have a friend who very briefly worked for an advertising agency creating the articles for these sites, because this was back before ChatGPT could automate all this nonsense. Now, that specific tactic doesn't really work anymore because Google has adjusted its thing so it prioritizes reliable sources, assuming they're not just being paid to put you at the top of the search page. But you know what's a really reliable source? When you can start inserting your stuff into an established site that's been around for a long time, which something like The Escapist is. These articles don't actually have to generate much traffic. They don't really have to generate any traffic on their own. They just need to exist on a site that has a decent reputation. That fact alone increases visibility for whatever the product or service is. James Stephanie Sterling broke all this down years ago, and while some of it has probably changed a little bit as algorithms and other stuff has shifted, it's clearly still in the mix to some degree, because otherwise there'd be no purpose of doing this. But yeah, turns out I wasn't exactly right when I said that the site was operating as normal. It just was if you only looked at the front page. And since I found stuff on the website that links to gambling and gambling-related stuff and casino products, that pretty much eliminates the idea that there was any kind of hack or takeover of the YouTube channel. I have my hunch on what's going on, but I need to show you a little bit more of how deep this rabbit hole goes, because I ended up stumbling on a bunch of other stuff that I don't necessarily have answers for, but it was just freaking weird. And yeah, I need to get this out of my brain, so you're stuck with it now. So I'm going to hand it back to Vera in the studio, and she's going to talk about why they didn't make another attempt to relaunch with the kind of content on the YouTube channel that the site was known for. Talent costs money. A writer costs money, even if they're the same person. An editor costs money. Even if all three of those are the same person, it's still going to cost you money. You know what doesn't cost you almost anything? Ripping off a bunch of streams from people who just play gambling games and slot machines digitally and just stringing them together and placing them on your channel. Like, there's no credits on these things, nor is there any explanation in the description of what this is or who these people are. It's just a thing about gambling involves risks, and it's a whole disclaimer about the fact that they're flatly showing gambling, but they don't want to be liable for that. Now, I'll get to where these clips actually came from in a minute, but it's very clear that this is something that's being fobbed off on an intern or is being added to the workload of an existing person. Nobody is a dedicated videographer or editor or anything over there anymore. And this clearly isn't being done to generate actual revenue on the YouTube channel, because if they wanted that, they were probably making profit off of the stuff with Brett Medlock. Not as much as they wanted, I'm sure, but for how lean they were in the number of people that actually appeared to be on staff, basically just Medlock and the editor, especially if you have them doing other things besides that as well, that probably was mildly profitable. I'm looking at their metrics and some of their views are decently respectable. I've managed to make this my living, and some of those numbers I would have been perfectly happy with, even proud of on a few occasions. So dropping that kind of content in favor of this low effort stuff that only gets a couple of thousand views, this is pulling in like single-digit dollars if that. But of course, these clips still have to come from somewhere. And we'll give it to Vera in the studio again to tell you where these actually came from. But okay, I've teased you with where this is coming from. I had to do a little bit of digging around, but it's coming from Kick. If you don't know what Kick is, here's a whole other rabbit hole I fell down because I didn't know what Kick was. Kick is an attempt to launch a rival to Twitch as a primarily streaming platform. And it launched in 2022 and has a not very good reputation. Its reputation primarily consists of having less stringent moderation than Twitch, which means that at least a decent chunk of the people on there were people who were kicked off of Twitch for one reason or another. Kick, while it does have community guidelines, is way more lax about enforcing them when it comes to everything from gambling to profanity to hate speech, the works. If you heard the story from last month about the French streamer who passed away live on stream, yeah, that was Kick. There's a lot that is still being untangled about that whole mess, but Kick is not a reputable place. It honestly became the Rumble to Twitch's YouTube. If you don't know what Rumble is, or was, is it still around? I don't know. It was an attempt to create a conservative alternative to YouTube while trying to hide the fact that it was a conservative alternative to YouTube, but because it had a very similar thing to Kick, where the main selling point to attract people was basically, we won't censor you the way that YouTube and or Twitch does. That means it just attracted a whole bunch of people who were banned off the platform and made for an instantly toxic environment. But coming back to Kick, gambling streams are huge over there. And I found in specific this guy who regularly streams gambling and digital slot machines on Kick. Now, if I had the time or patience, of which I have neither, I probably could have gone through the archived streams where he was playing what is clearly the same game that the clip from the Escapist video had and even find the specific moment. I'm not going to do that though. Some of those videos are multiple hours long. There's no way I'm combing through that, but it's definitely the same guy, definitely playing the same game, and this is where he streams. Hey, it's me from the edit again. So my initial suspicion was that they were being pulled from Kick because it was very unlikely that the creators on Kick would spot that their stuff had been ripped off and was now uploaded to YouTube. The kinds of people who stream on Kick are the kind of people who probably couldn't maintain a channel presence on YouTube for the same reason that they aren't streaming on Twitch. They probably skirt the rules a bit too much in most cases. So they wouldn't be monitoring YouTube for their clips to show up. I assumed this stuff was flat out stolen. I don't think that's actually the case anymore. I think all of this has to do with synergy related to Casino Coin and some other stuff. And now we need to get back down that freaking rabbit hole I uncovered during the edit. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might notice the same two names being listed on literally all of these casino and gambling related articles on The Escapist. Those names are Charlie Pearson and Frida Minyang. Either one of their names was on every single blatant SEO gambling quote-unquote article that I saw on the site. Now, if you go to their profiles on the site, they are both listed as iGaming Editor, and despite how many supposed articles have their names on them, they are each credited with only writing one thing for the site. That actually might be kind of appropriate because when I actually started looking at these things, I realized it's just two different lists of gambling related sites over and over again. It's either this list or this list. Note that Casino Coin is listed as the number one on this list, but it's always one of these two with a slightly different opening paragraph and then just the exact same list of the same companies in the same order. So it may actually be true that each of them has only quote unquote written one thing for the site and it just gets recycled over and over again because again, it's not actually there to be read. But then again, that also doesn't make a ton of sense because the one thing that is listed on each of their profiles is not the thing that they have their names all over the rest of the site. Probably an effort to obscure what it is that's going on. For a hot second, I actually wondered if either of these people was even real, except they both have LinkedIn accounts, interestingly, attached to their profiles on The Escapist. Now, that's not completely unusual. Some other creators on there have a few socials linked, and some will even put LinkedIn on there. If you go and look at their LinkedIn pages, they do look legitimate in terms of, the amount of past work, other places, etc., etc. It doesn't look like a fully fake account. It still could be, but it's a little less likely. Now on Frida's LinkedIn, she lists her position at The Escapist as content expert as opposed to iGaming editor as is listed on the site. She also has the same title at Best Casino, which is a hub for online gambling. Charlie doesn't actually list The Escapist as a job that he has or has had at any point on his LinkedIn. Instead, he lists his current position as lead editor at ClickOut Media. What is ClickOut Media? Well, let me read you from their LinkedIn. ClickOut Media is a remote-first, industry-leading, multi-channel marketing company delivering first-in-class SEO and content for esteemed clients all over the world. Once you scrape the buzzwords off of that, it's just an SEO company. So here's what I think is happening. I think that Coin Casino or Best Casino, or maybe they're the same company, or possibly even a conglomeration of cooperating casino-related businesses, or again, maybe multiple businesses run by the same people. It's really hard to parse that in this kind of space. But they are using The Escapist, primarily the website, as a vehicle for SEO for their business. And Charlie and Frida are facilitating that. They are likely the go-betweens for The Escapist and, well, the companies on either of those two lists. So why is the YouTube channel being handled so ham-fistedly when they're being a bit sneakier about stuff on the actual Escapist website? At a guess, it was probably a pot sweetener that didn't really cost the Escapists or Gamers group, who was probably the more likely to have linked up with these people. It doesn't really cost them anything. The channel was effectively dead and hadn't uploaded anything in a year. It doesn't really matter if they tank it at this point because it has very little value, but for the clients, they can at least claim, hey, we're gonna put videos of people gambling using your sites up on a channel with over 1 million subscribers. Does that have any value? No, because that kind of content has no place on that channel. Nobody wants it and nobody watches it, but you can still claim that. And like I said, I think it's a pot sweetener. And since Gamers Group clearly didn't see enough value in the channel to try and maintain it as anything that it had been before, this was just kind of a throwaway for them. Now I'm pretty comfortable with that assessment, but before I return you to Vera in the studio for the wrap-up, there is one other thing I came across that I don't have as firm a conclusion on, but is too dang weird not to tell you about. So while I was working my way back through the search results of just putting casino into the Escapist website, for the record, the massive influx of casino-related stuff seemed to largely actually come from March of 2025 onward, at least the blatant SEO stuff, which is coincidentally the date that is listed as the start of Frida working there. But anyway, as I was going back through it, it eventually threw up the Escapist editorial policy and responsible gaming guide at me. I'm not even entirely sure why, but looking over these, it's pretty standard stuff, not really much to write home about. I mean, the responsible gaming stuff is pretty close to what's currently being put in the descriptions of the videos going up on the Escapist YouTube channel. But you'll notice that both of these are credited to someone named Ksenia Chapchakova, and I'm not sure that's a real person. First thing, when you actually click on that name where you should get a profile like the ones I showed you for Charlie and Frida, instead, you get a lovely 404 message. Now, in trying to find out whether or not this was a real person, I tried taking that name and just plugging it into Google and seeing what I got. Most of my search results thought I had misspelled the name and gave me other people, but there were 2 other gaming-related sites that had Ksenia's name show up on them. She has a listing as an author on both sides, although in both cases, no image and no articles credited to her. That's still more than The Escapist, which just gave me the 404 error page. But those 2 other sites are adventuregamers.com and videogamer.com. I couldn't find a whole lot of information about videogamer.com, but adventuregamers.com has been around for quite a while and used to be quite respected in the niche of adventure gaming. You want to know what both of those sites look like now? Are you even vaguely surprised? You see, this was kind of what I'd expected to find the entire Escapist site to be. Here, they're not even doing the cover of pretending that the gambling and casino related things are just an aspect of what they do. Oh, and hey, look at that. It's exactly the same as one of those lists that kept popping up in The Escapist. On both Adventure Gamers and Video Gamer, there seems to be a very similar structure in terms of who is getting credited for this stuff. The full-on casino SEO slop posts are all credited to a single person on each site. But in addition, both sites also seem to have someone who appears to be a more legitimate games journalist who is also doing, let's say, casino-adjacent writing. These people aren't just reproducing the same list like we also saw in The Escapist, but instead are writing articles that actually have a little bit more legitimacy in terms of their connection to actual games and gaming, but they still normalize the topic of gambling and casinos on the site. On Adventure Gamers, the semi-legitimate stuff is written by one Varun Karunakar, and all the slop, which is, yeah, pretty much all that same frickin' list again, is written by one Jovan Milenkovic. On Jovan's LinkedIn, guess what? SEO specialist, started in April this year. Over on Video Gamer, the semi-legitimate stuff is by Tom Bardwell, who's been there for a bit, and the absolute slop is by Miranda Raff, who has only been there since July. Interesting that pretty much all this on all these sites is from a several month time span all this year. Now, in regards to Bardwell on Video Gamer and Karunakar on Adventure Gamers, I do want to try and give some benefit of the doubt. They do appear to be more or less legitimate journalists, and when I say that their articles are semi-legitimate, I'm just talking about the work that they're cranking out, not necessarily them as actual professionals. I don't have any way of knowing if they were in a situation where, like, they were offered a bonus for doing this kind of stuff on top of their normal work, or if it was a, you better do some stuff that will connect things back to casinos and gambling or you're fired deal. I did notice a slight difference in their approaches in that Karunakar seems to do his best to legitimize gambling related stuff, but put it in a framework that still attaches it to a game that isn't only about gambling, whereas Bardwell seems to hop back and forth between fairly legitimate journalistic work and stuff that is just barely better than the slop lists. There is still a small trickle of actual work being done over at Adventure Gamers. That seems to all be getting done by N. Stonham, who freelances or contracts for a few different places, including The Escapist. I think that might just be a coincidence, but it's also hard to know. I think I might be getting paranoid because of some stuff that I noticed on Charlie Pearson's LinkedIn. Remember one of the two people who does the list over on The Escapist? I noticed that on Charlie Pearson's LinkedIn, it suddenly changed. The listing that he used to have for Clickout Media is now listing The Escapist. Exact same titles, dates, everything else, but it's now switched companies. Not to get overly conspiratorial or paranoid on here, but some of the higher end functions on LinkedIn, if you're paying for them, is the ability to see specifically is who is looking at your profile and what on your profile they are clicking. I'm not going to go so far as to say I think Charlie noticed that I was scoping out both him and Clickout Media and made the change before somebody started to blow the whistle on these connections, but I can't help but have the thought. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but like, come on! I did check, neither of these are owned by Gamers Group, which would have been my first guess. Videogamer.com is owned by BGFG, which stands for By Gamers for Gamers. I have to be honest, I have a little trouble parsing what their business is. It might just be a holding company. I did check some of the other websites they own, and they are not all vandalized the way that Video Gamer is. As for Adventure Gamers, that was bought by a guy named Ivo Teal, who has some experience in gaming space, but in the early 2020s, it looks like he got into Web3, crypto, and all that kind of stuff, and now just exists in that space. So while all of this would have been a hell of a lot cleaner if I could have tied this all back to either Gamers Group, or Charlie, or Frida, or Clickout Media, or whatever, it does seem to be spread across a few different places, but the interconnections that I found gives me this picture. Clickout Media and or organizations like it are working with casino-based cryptocurrencies and online gambling platforms to just SEO the heck out of their clients. It then likely becomes a negotiation with whoever the deal is offered to for how much they are going to be allowed to vandalize an existing site and make it nothing but gambling. Gamers let them take over the YouTube channel because it was basically worthless to them now, and they just filled it up with clips from gambling streamers, some of whom I would not be surprised if they have their own brand deals with some of these gambling-related companies, or possibly are just flat out subsidized by them. But they didn't let them completely overthrow the main site for Escapist. BGFG let them run rampant on Video Gamer, and IVOTeal let them run rampant on AdventureGamers.com. Which are both treated basically like inverse Escapists. On the Escapists, you have to hunt a little bit for the casino stuff. On these other two, you have to hunt to find stuff that isn't the casino stuff. Now again, it may not all be Clickout Media in specific, but I think what I found is an exemplary instance of the kind of thing that is happening. It is interesting that they all appear to be using the exact same fake name that is showing up on these various sites. Not entirely sure what that's about. The fact that it's not more widespread might mean that these specific three instances, Escapist, Video Gamer, and Adventure Gamers, are all connected to the same people, and then other places where this is happening is being brokered through other agencies. But bringing all of this back to the Escapists, what it looks like to me is that Gamers Group is not doing great. They needed some increased revenue, and so they cut a deal with basically a sleazy promotion company that works with sleazy clients in order to help their sleazy businesses be more appealing in the algorithm for searching and things of that nature. And they were willing to throw some of their assets completely under the bus for however much money they got out of this deal. I think that's about as far down this rabbit hole as I feel like going. So I'm going to hand it back over to Vera in the studio. And somehow that's now what the Escapist is. The Escapist has gone through a lot over the years. While Yahtzee Croshaw was the backbone basically up until he left, there was a lot of other stuff that went on with that channel. They brought in other stuff. They brought in people to focus on movies. They had people focusing on different gaming content from what Croshaw was doing. A lot of that fell apart, and then it was just Croshaw for a while, but then it was rebuilt again under Nick Calandra until Gamers Group decided to fire him and he took everybody with him. But the Escapist was still around, and for a minute, it looked like it might still be a thing. Not nearly as interesting a thing, but a thing. Now it's just this. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Except I say that, and honestly, the mighty just moved to a different house that they owned so they didn't have to work with a crappy landlord anymore. Well, they're still on YouTube. They have to work with a crappy landlord that they had before, but they got rid of one of their crappy landlords. The metaphor doesn't hold up. Sorry. But regardless, it's just really fascinating to find myself pointed towards a channel I used to regularly check out and just see the ghost town that it is. And somehow the ghosts are trying to run a casino. And it's sad. I don't have a greater point to this. It was just so weird, I kind of wanted to share it. What are your thoughts about this? Did you ever check out The Escapist before? Are you following Second Wind? Did you know what was happening on the YouTube channel? Have you ever actually read stuff on the site? Is it any good? Was it then? Is it now? I don't know. There was only so much I was willing to dig into the background and history of all that. But whatever your thoughts might be, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. A like, a share, subscribe. Those all help me out, but don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons, Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lafula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Alyssa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite, as well as Welsh Wrestling Geeks. So, folks said they wanted the rats back. Here they are. I really should have not worn something that exposed this much skin. Their nails are sharp. Ow. Oh, you guys. Get back.